Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Mem Pei in קידושין. We learned for Porcelain for Los Ben Ruben and Yosef Shua Ben Chaim Michal. From the two dots, about 8-9 lines down of the page, Itmar. Meis v'nafel flei ochiv v'yibum. Now, what are we talking here? Discussing yesterday the issue when a young girl who's under the age of 12, she's a katana, and she gets married. She marries on her own without her father's consent. Is that a marriage or not? So we came out that halacha is really like Yula. You don't even need me, and it's meaningless. She cannot get married on her own. That if her father's around doesn't mean anything. Even if her father is dead or he's out of the picture because he had married her off once before, she can have a קידושין drabanan. But here, if her father's here and he doesn't agree to it, he has consent, there's no marriage at all. However, there's a machlokas. Rav and Shmuel both held that, you have to be concerned. Maybe he would have agreed to it. Maybe if father didn't consent, but maybe her father, when told about it, would agree to it. So you need a get. So here we get to this question. This young girl who got engaged, again, she's only betrothed on her own. She didn't get married, fully married. She got engaged on her own. If you hold like Rav and Shmuel, because we're going to give her shita of Rav, we said like the halacha is that you don't need anything. When her father's alive, what she does is meaningless, doesn't count at all. But Rav and Shmuel said that it does count. You have to be concerned. Maybe the father would have agreed. So let's say this young girl who got engaged to Reuven, we'll call her the Ketana, right? She got engaged to Reuven on her own. And now Reuven dies. There's no children, obviously. And there's a brother Shimon, right? Yibum. What do you do here? Itmar Meis, but nothing say Ochiv, she fell before Shimon. Now, what happens? Remember Mimer? Mimer is a קידושין drabanan that a Yavam does to a Yavam. In Torah, all you do is he sleeps with her, and that consummates the marriage, and that's it. There is no קידושין. But the rabbi said you should have קידושין. Let's say he gives her taka Mimer, and what's the halacha? If after Mimer, in a regular case, if after Mimer they decide to split up, or he doesn't want to marry her, he has to give her both chalitza and a get for the Mimer and chalitza for the zika, which is mer min Torah. But over here, it's really not a marriage min Torah. We're just concerned maybe the father consented. So he said, you know what you need here? She needs mian for the Mimer, but just for the zika. In other words, just for the connection between her and Shimon, because she was, so to speak, partially, somewhat married on her own to Reuven. She doesn't need mian for that. Okay, so what do we mean over here? Let's explain. Also by Mimer, if Shimon, now the brother, did Mimer to her, tzricha get, tzricha chalitza, tzricha mean, she needs all three. She needs all three. Tzricha get, why does she need to get? Number one, Shem Nisratzav. Maybe the father would have agreed to the marriage, right? The Kedusha Sheni. Let's say he agrees to the second marriage. Maybe he didn't like the first marriage and he wouldn't have agreed to it. Okay, so it's meaningless. Give an example. If you have two brothers, Reuven and Shimon, and Reuven sleeps with a girl, Shalom l'shem Kedushin. They didn't marry, they just, had a relationship. Can Shimon marry her? Yes, he could. He could. Not a nice thing, but he could marry her. She wasn't married to Reuven. So here too, maybe the father wanted the second marriage. Okay, so you need a get here. Maybe even a get. Maybe she's really married to Shimon. Maybe she didn't like Reuven, like Shimon. Maybe the father wanted the first marriage. If the father wanted the first marriage to Reuven and Reuven died, so from Shimon she needs chalitza. She's a Yavama. Right? Why do you need mian? What do you need mian? Shema lo nisratzav lo b'kedusha rishon lo b'kedusha sheni. Maybe the father didn't want either one. And Rashi points out the קידושין rishon is lav dafka, even if he wanted the first one. But if he didn't want the second one, even if he wanted the first one but didn't want the second one, right? And it's only קידושין you want it. Yomru ein קידושין tosim b'chosa. What's happening is this: if he wanted the second, if he didn't want the second marriage at all, right, and he only wanted the first one but not the second one, like the Gemara says very simply, the father didn't want either one of them. Let's say, a simple case, father didn't want either one of them, and they'll say what? But since you gave her a get and chalitza, you'll say if you gave her a get, it must have been that there was a marriage. And therefore, if now this guy, Shimon, goes and marries her sister, you don't need a get from that because you can't marry somebody's sister if you were married to the first one and you gave her a get. That's a chos gushaso. You can't marry two sisters, in the lifetime of one. If one of them dies, you can marry the other sister. But if you're married to sister number one and you divorce her, you can't marry number two. So over here, when you gave the number one a divorce, people will say, okay, number two's קידושין is not tofes. Therefore, by giving mian, you're showing that it wasn't really a marriage, maybe minat Torah. So therefore, you need all three. You need get, chalitza, and mian. Lo asaba mimer. Let's say he didn't do mimer. Again, what happened over here? Ruvain got married to this Ketana without her father's consent, and he dies. And now Shimon's in the picture, his brother, and he didn't do mimer. She only needs chalitza, right? Maybe she's married. We're not sure. Chalitza bavad. Why? What's the concern? Maybe the father would have agreed to the first marriage, so she needs chalitza now. If he didn't do mimer, there's no reason for a get, right? He never really married. Shimon never gave her any kind of a marriage at all. So it's not like it. And even on the first way, when he gave her a mimer, again, the mimer is only good with the consent of the father. Remember, if you look back on yesterday's Daf Memdala, the top line, Tana min Eirison ain't osim b'mimer elamidas aviyah. A Tana from Eirison, you can only do mimer if the father consents. If the father didn't consent, it's not like a regular yavama. Maybe if the father didn't consent, even if the father consented to the first one, that's what Rashi points out. Lo b'kedush rishon, lo b'kedush sheni. The reason why you need me, as Gemara says, because maybe the father didn't consent to the first one or the second one. Rashi points out that some you mentioned Kedushin, because even if he wanted the first Kedushin, he still needed his consent for the mimer of the second one. And if you don't have that consent, it's not marriage. So if he didn't agree to the second one, that's not a mimer. And that's not a mimer at all. And if there's not a mimer, she's not really married to the second guy at all. And this that you gave a get, people think that it was a marriage. And if he now marries her sister, people say you don't need a get because it was a marriage. Therefore, you give mimer there too. If he didn't do mimer, and therefore you give me in there too. If he didn't do mimer, loss of a mimer, all you need is chalitza bavad. Mimer, what are you going to say? Wait a minute. But if you give her chalitza, doesn't that show that it's a marriage minat Torah? And people again will assume that what? That if Shimon gave chalitza to this lady Leah, and now he marries Leah's sister, Rachel, whatever, her sister, you don't need a get from there because it's not a marriage. Maybe people think that קידושין is not tofes on Rachel because since you gave chalitza to the sister Leah, since Shimon gave chalitza to Leah, and now if he marries Rachel, people think you don't need a get. Why? Because it's a chos chulutz also. Not to worry. Everybody knows a chos chulutz rabbanan. Remember, chalutza is similar to a grusha, right? He divorced her, but chalutza is with the avama, and grusha was with the regular wife. There are differences. For example, a kohen can't marry a grusha. We know that, right? Right? It says in the Torah that isha grusha meisha lo tikach. However, he could marry a chalutza min Torah, but we mix up chalutza with grusha, so we say gzeira that a kohen shouldn't marry a chalutza either. Similarly, we say that the isser of a chos chalutza is only drabanan because of the chos grushaso, and therefore, even if we knew that Shimon gave chalitza, a real chalitza, to Leah, his yavama, and now he married her sister, you would need a get because the isser is only drabanan, not a daraisa. When it's a chos grushaso, if you divorce somebody and you marry her sister, that doesn't count at all. Everybody knows that. Amar Shlokish Kanchan Rabbi, a chos grusha b'daraisa, chos grushaso is a daraisa, chos grusha is only midivrei sofer. And Rashi points out the case in Yavamas where Bivama Shikna Cholitz, Rashi about 5 lines into the wide lines in Rashi, V'nasa Achav as a choso. You give chalitza to Yavam. Shimon gave chalitza to Leah, let's say, and now Shimon's brother Levi married Rachel, and he died, and now Rachel fell to Shimon. So let's just flow Mesirbem. You can't make even, right? Because it's like similar to chos chulutz, it's a chos chulutzaso, right? He can't marry Rachel because he gave chalitza to Leah. But if he divorced his wife, and then Shimon, let's say, was married to Leah, fully married, and he divorced her. And now his brother Levi married Rachel, and Levi died, and Rachel fell before Shimon. You're puttering totally because the chos grushaso is putter. So that's back in the Gemara. So here, we're still discussing this issue. If a young girl at Tana gets married on her own, Rav and Shmuel said the father didn't give consent. The father has authority over her, right? And if he didn't give her consent, we paskin like Ula, you don't even need me, and nothing over here. It doesn't count. Rav and Shmuel said you have to be concerned. Maybe the father agreed. Maybe the father agreed. If the father agreed, you need a get. And Shmuel said you need a get and you need me, right? He says, so why do you need me and why do you need a get? So he said, okay, what did we explain? We said, time am I? You need a get. Maybe the father agreed to it. And maybe the father did agree to it. And if the father didn't agree to it and you gave her a get, people will think that if there's no mean, that it's a real divorce. And if now he marries her sister, the sister wouldn't even need a get. She needs a get because maybe it wasn't a real marriage. That's what the Gemara said. Now we're 5 lines from the bottom of Mem Hey Amar Aleph in the Gemara. Hanubei Trey, there were 2 guys, two adult men. One had a young girl, a daughter, and one had a son. Hanubei Trey Davikoshas Uchamra. 2 people were drinking together to see under a tree, under a willow tree, or under some sort of a mat, like on a porch or something. They were having a drink, a bubble in Babylonia. One took a cup of wine, let's say. The other gave it to his friend. Amar Mekachli Barsach Labri. I'd like your daughter. This is a kiss of קידושין. Instead of a ring, I'd like your daughter to marry my son. I'd like this is like the wedding ring. I'm giving you a gift, a kesef, right? I'd like your daughter to marry my son. Amar Avina. Now, let's understand something. A father can marry off his daughter. We're talking about she's a young daughter. He could agree without her consent, but not a son. The son, first of all, has to be bar mitzvah, and it's got to be his consent. The father has no authority over his son to marry him off. Amar Ravina, so Ravina said, remember the name was Ravina. We're going to come back to that. Even if you hold like Rav and Shmuel, that maybe when the young girl married herself off, you have to be concerned she needs a get because maybe the father would have agreed. Even if you hold that way, not that I agree, Ravina says. We'll see. Not that Ravina agrees. We'll see. He doesn't agree with that either. But even if you hold that you're worried, maybe the father would agree to it. In the case of Kana, Shemisratza Ben Lam, you don't say that at all. Amila Rabina, why? Why not? Maybe the son made his father a messenger. Maybe the son said, listen, you're having a drink with that guy, he doesn't like me so much, but maybe drink him, get him a little inebriated and he'll agree, and I want to marry this girl. Maybe the son made his father a messenger. He wouldn't, it's not proper for a son to make his father the shliach. Okay, I guess in those days the sons had more of a back to themselves, right? They wouldn't make their father shliach. It was considered in chutzpah, yeah. Consider chutzpah arrogant to make your father shliach. He wouldn't have done that. But maybe the son had indicated that he liked the girl and he wanted to marry her. And if that's the case, even though he didn't make him a shliach, Rashi says it's like zachalon shlo b'fanav. If the son indicated to his father that he liked her, shu chavetzba, and the father it could be a shliach on his own, zachalon shlo b'fanav. Maybe that's the case. Amar lo Rav Shapiro didn't really answer the question directly, because it's not from Rashi that if the son did indicate that he liked her and the father acted on his behalf, maybe it would be good, because the father of the girl could certainly agree. But Amalu Rav Shapiro, I heard Ravina, who's the author of this memra, say he doesn't hold of Rav and Shmuel that a girl can get married on her own, right? A girl can get married, and Kolshkein, not the father, and not you can't marry a son without his consent. And Rashi says like this: but favor Shemat men the lo savla Rav Shmuel the Amri Choshin Shemes Ratzah, but Kolshkein the Shema also a ben shliach. That you're worried about. We're not concerned in general that if a young girl kind of marries on her own, you're not concerned that maybe the father agreed to it, and whatever she did doesn't count, like Ula said. Right. In other words, Rabbeinu Paskin like Ula, like the Rambam Paskin, that it doesn't mean anything. He doesn't hold of Shmuel. And certainly you're not concerned that maybe the son made his father shliach, unless you heard him say beferish. If you heard him say beferish and he agreed to it, in other words, mashma dilmar tzui artzei kamei. Yeah, maybe if you know that the son made his father the shliach, say it's chutzpah, or the son indicated that he liked her, fine, okay, then it would be good. But otherwise, the father has no rights over the son. He can't tell the son He can't decide on his own. Even if the son's young, the Kedusha is not chal. You need to be bar mitzvah, right? There's nobody who has authority over the son, and the father. And once he's bar mitzvah, the father certainly has no rishus over him. As the father has no rishus over his son, he can't take a marriage for his son. Father can make a marriage for his daughter up until the age of 12 and a half, as we've seen. It's up to him, not up to her. So who gavra? Okay, so here again, we're continuing this discussion because Rav and Shmuel said that when a young girl marries on her own, you have to be concerned about the marriage. Who gavra the kodesh b'kisha the yarka b'shukah. A man went and got engaged to a young girl, again a katana, without her father's consent. Father agreed to it. There's no issue, right? But he got engaged to a girl. What did he give her as a wedding ring? He gave her a bunch of vegetables, and he did it in the shuk, which is considered disgusting to marry like in the shuk, like while they're shopping over there. Even if you hold like Rav and Shmuel, that maybe you have to consider, maybe the father agreed to it, and you need to get, that's only if he did it in an honorable fashion. The marriage took place, the קידושין took place in an honorable fashion. But over here, and there's a shameful way that he gave her vegetables in the marketplace. That's nothing. No, nobody would have agreed to that. That's really low down. Why is it shameful? Is it because shameful because he got engaged to her with vegetables, which will be rotten by tomorrow? He designed the shukah, or that he got engaged to her in the marketplace. Nafkamina would be the kaddish b'kaspa b'shukah. Let's say he married her with nice money or with a nice wedding ring in the marketplace. Would that still be considered disgraceful? Obikisha the arkavesa, or he married her at home in a normal place, in a wedding hall, whatever. But he gave her vegetables as a wedding to consummate the wedding, to make the wedding effective. What's the chutzpah, the marketplace or the vegetables? My Omerlei, they're both bezayin. In other words, either one is a bezayin. It's not considered a marriage. Even if you hold like Rav and Shmuel that you have to be concerned, maybe the father would have agreed to it. He wouldn't have agreed to marrying off his daughter for a bunch of vegetables or in the marketplace. Hahuda Omer Likravoy. This is a famous case. You have this case, we had it several places where you have a couple who are arguing over who their daughter should get married to. He wanted the daughter to get married to one of his relatives, his cousins, and the wife wanted her to get married to one of her cousins. They were in a fight about that. So she convinced him, she nagged him, she bothered him, or whatever. She had some strong hold over him until he finally agreed. They have their ways, right? They have their ways. She finally convinced him to marry off the girl to her family. Okay, so they arranged a little party and they invited people. They sent out a WhatsApp with an invitation to the Erusin, and they were sitting out of Achli B'Shasi. They were sitting and drinking. While they were sitting and drinking there, and they hadn't yet performed the Erusin. The Erusin hadn't performed. This was like the smorgasbord before the Erusin. Before that took place, Asa Kreve, his relatives, who he had agreed not to. His relative came, Bigra upstairs, like on the roof or upstairs. The Kisha was Makadish, this young girl, without their consent. Now, what would you say there? Again, originally, the father wanted her to get married to his relatives. So maybe you'd say in this case, even if you don't know like Rav and Shmuel, but he showed his consent, what would you say there, Vikisha? Rabbi Pasuk says, Sheris Yisrael Yasu Avla. The remnant of Israel will not perform any iniquity, won't lie. In other words, since he had agreed that she would get married to the wife's relatives, he does not agree to this, and it's not a marriage. He prepared the whole meal, the whole wedding, the engagement feast, etc. He prepared all that. He's not going to prepare it all and then throw it out by having it invalid and a fight will break out. She got married to the other guy. Let's say he wasn't matriach. Let's say maybe the other side, maybe the groom side had prepared the meal. And if you say that the reason is because he's not Tarek Basuda, here he wasn't Tarek Basuda, so maybe he would renege. But if you say the reason is that a man wouldn't lie, we assume Jews don't lie, then that would apply either way, and the marriage that took place is invalid because the father had agreed that she would marry the wife's relatives. Now, what happens in this case? So we had this machlokas, and we paskin again that she cannot get married on her own without her father's consent. Right? Let's say the father consented to the קידושין. Well, and then he went overseas. And, in those days, they would have the engagement before, and they would get married a year later, whatever. And then while the father was under this, she got married on her own without the father's consent. Now, again, once she's fully married, if the father consents to a marriage, remember, even if she's 1 day old, once she's married, the father is no rishus. But over here, she was only engaged. So the father still could determine when she gets married. And here she got married on without the father's consent.
To a different guy.
No, the same one. Guy. Same guy. The Scotchel Dasabia. Well, and another one overseas. She got engaged, but the father still had rishus to decide if she's going to get married to the guy. And she got married. What would you say? Amra, if he's a Kohen, she can eat truma she can eat truma if the father comes home and protests and says, no, I never agreed to the marriage, then she'd have to stop eating truma, right? Until you decide what to do. If you don't agree to the marriage, you have to get divorced, work things out, right? Rav Asi Amar Eino Chelas, she can't eat truma. Because maybe the father will come home, he'll protest, and then she'll be forbidden to eat the truma, and he never agreed to it. But it comes out that she was not the wife of a Kohen, and she was eating truma. Retroactively, comes out she was eating truma wrongly. There was a ma'isa, even though Rav passed that she could eat truma, but when a case actually happened and she got married without her father's consent, Rav said, you know what, don't eat the truma. Rav Shmuel Rav Yitzchak, Modu Rav, she mesa any yorsha. Even though Rav says she could eat truma, Rav is modu. Let's say she dies now. Now, when she dies, who inherits a wife? The husband, not the children, the husband. So over here, she wasn't really married to him. Then a Torah, if the father didn't agree to it, yet, well, it's a suffix. Okay, leave the money where it was. The money's in the wife's estate. The estate didn't turn over yet to the husband. We don't know for sure if he's a husband. So you leave it where it is in her family's rishus. So she mesa and yorsha. You leave the money where it is. We don't know that she's really married to be the husband. If she dies now, the husband says, well, I got married to her, yes, but it wasn't with the consent of the father. We don't know for sure that the father would have agreed to it. So you can't take the money, leave the money in her family's rishus. However, Rashi points out, but Rav still says she could have eaten truma. Why? Because truma you could really eat as soon as they're engaged, right? What's the reason why she doesn't eat truma? Zera, maybe she'll give it to her brothers, or maybe the other reason of simple, maybe he'll find a mum, and the whole thing was Hank Mac's toast, and it turns out she was never married. So it's only Zera, but technically, so Rav says, listen, the father agreed to the marriage. She's the father agreed to it, to the engagement. Father agreed to the engagement, so Minotaur, she could eat truma right away. However, even Rav said, okay, I'm choshish for Rav Asi, and better that she shouldn't eat truma right away, because maybe the father will come home and say, I didn't agree to the marriage. Maybe I wanted the marriage in a different city or whatever it was. Yeah.
Yesterday we had a data that said that if a young girl, if I remember correctly, young girl gets married without the father's consent, there was a pshash, maybe he did consent.
Right, maybe consent, that's right.
And here we have a clear sign that
the father
consent
for the engagement, but not for the marriage. That's right. That's right. That's right.
Clear sign
that's right. That's why Rav says she can eat truma. Exactly right. But we don't know about the case. We don't know if he would agree to the marriage. Maybe he wanted the marriage in a different city, or maybe he changed his mind. That's the point. Yes, he agreed to it originally. You have a clear sign. Fine. Now we're going to talk more cases like that also. We're going to see similar cases like that. Yeah. So
just very
yeah. No, you're going to ask an even better question in a minute. Wait a second. Okay. Now, Niskadshah Ladas, let's say she got married with the consent of her father. The Nisa Shaloladas, right? And again, she got married without. She got engaged with his consent. She got married without his consent. But via Khan, the father's here at home. The father's home. He saw what took place. She didn't ask him. She just went ahead and got married. And it's obvious that she got married. So Rav Huna says, in that case, ain't no chelas, right? Rav Huna says, ain't no chelas. Now, Rav Huna says, now she can't eat truma. Rav Yirmiyah says, oh chelas. What's going on over here? Going over. Rav Huna ain't no chelas. She can't eat truma. Even though Rav said before when she got engaged with his consent and got married without his consent, and he went overseas, right? He went overseas. So what do? Rav said over there she could eat. He's not here, so maybe had he been here, he would have consented to it. The father's here. Why he was quiet? He was angry. You didn't ask me. In other words, even Rav Huna says, even Rav who said before she could, if she got engaged with the father's consent, he went overseas, she got married. Rav says, okay, she can eat truma until the father comes home and protests. Here, if he's in town and he doesn't say anything, it's because he's angry, and therefore he's effectively protested. Therefore he can't eat truma. Rav Yirmiyah says just the opposite. Rav Yirmiyah says, "Oh chelas, she can eat truma definitely." Even Ravasi, who said when the guy went overseas and he didn't consent to the marriage, and she got married, and he's a Kohen, she cannot eat truma because maybe he wouldn't consent. Maybe he'll come home and protest and say, "I want you to get divorced," etc. Maybe he'll come home and they'll protest. Since he was quiet, he was happy with it. He agreed to it. In other words, it's the exact opposite. The father, in this case, the father agreed to the engagement, and he's home. Since she gets engaged, she goes and gets married to him without even asking the father, not inviting the father to the marriage, right, to the marriage itself. And the father doesn't say anything. So what is that? Does the father agree or not? Just the two opposites for us. Rav Huna says, no, she can't eat truma. The father didn't say anything because he's angry. You didn't invite me to the wedding. I'm right here, and you didn't invite me to the wedding. I don't agree to anything. And Rav Yirmiyah says just the opposite. The fact that he was quiet shows that he agrees with it. Yeah, Shtiga does. So you see opposite views. The Scotch Shalom Dasavia. Now, what happens? She got engaged without her father's consent, and she got married without her father's consent. La'afia kind of her father's here. Rav Huna says ochelas. Huna says she can eat truma. Whoa! She got engaged without his father's consent, and she got engaged without his consent. We talked yesterday. Rob and Shmuel said what? That you need a get in case the father would have agreed. That blah blah blah. The father's here, and he doesn't agree to anything. Rav Huna says she can eat truma. This is a strange shita. Rav Yirmiyah says ain't no chelas. Amar Ula, who said yesterday what? That she cannot do anything on her own, right? If she does on her own, you don't need a get, you don't need anything. When Ma'aseh Tana, like Rashi quoted, she'ein Ma'aseh Tana klum b'chayaviyah. Ula says, Rav Huna, this is Rav Huna says that she can eat truma. Kachometz l'shinayim, it's like vinegar for the teeth, like smoke to the eyes. This is a terrible. How can you say that? Ashta, listen, ma'hasam the קידושין d'oraisa. Ma'adach in the previous case where the father agreed to the קידושין, right? He consented to קידושין. Right, Amrit lo achla, right? Even in that case, Ravasi said you can't eat if she got married without consent. Hachalo kolshkein, right? Hachalo kolshkein over here, where he didn't agree to anything. Certainly she couldn't eat truma. So how could Rav Huna say you can eat truma? Near and Devriyat Talmud, I agree with the Talmud, meaning Rav Yirmiyah Barabba, who was a Talmud of Rav Huna. I agree with his sheet, not with the Rebbe. Rabba my time Rav Huna. What's Rav Huna's svara? How could Rav Huna say that? Again, he said, you know what? If the father didn't say anything, the father's here, right? And the father's here, Rabia Khan. It's not like he's not around. Father's here. She gets engaged to the guy on her own. She's a Ketana. She's 10 years old. And she gets married to the guy, and the father doesn't say anything. It's like he relinquished his authority. Rashi, look at Rashi. It's like he had married her off when she was 1 year old, and now he's out of the picture. It's like Ma'is B'chayev Kitsha V'Sia Atzma. While he was alive, she got engaged and got married on her own. Shalom Dato. Kilu Yisamas, as if she's an orphan. Vu Rav Shasak, and he saw it, and he was quiet. Oh, Hiftir's Chushes, or he abandoned any authority that he had in her, right? Any schus that he had in her, any rights that he had in her. Sheish Labam. Or is by being quiet, he was moda. When she got married, engaged with his consent, you could say with one shtika he was he got angry, right? Oh, you got married on your own after I consented. Why didn't you invite me? I will kuli hilo shosek, to see his daughter engaged, betrothed, and married without his consent, and he's here. He wouldn't have been quiet, and therefore it must be that he agreed. This is Rav Huna's far out shita, but obviously we don't pass that way.
Between the two cases, one I asked on before,
Yeah.
is that was like Dina Sayyad, he's away.
Yeah. Over here, the guy's here.
So here, if he's away, this halacha doesn't apply.
Yeah. No, before we talk about
only when he's there.
When he's there, yeah, but when he's not there, we have the machlokas Rav and Ravasi. Right. If he went overseas, we have the machlokas Rav and Ravasi. But here, the guy's home. But Rav Yabba says no, she can't eat truma if he doesn't agree to it. Even when he's home, we have this machlokas. If she did everything on her own, Ula holds like Rav Yirmiyah Barabba that no, she's not. She can't eat truma. She's not married at all. It's meaningless. So he had Rav and Shmuel one way. Ula Paskin's another way. Itmar, another case. Let's just this. If Tana gets engaged without her father's consent, in other words, since it's not really a marriage Torah, like we've explained before, it's not a marriage at all. So if she wants to go back on it, and if the father says no, I don't agree to it, then before we were talking about, is it a marriage? It's not a marriage. We don't know what the father said, right? Maybe the father would agree. Maybe. Let's say the father says, no, I don't agree. I don't agree. He says, I don't agree. He says, clearly, I don't agree. It's not a marriage. She could also go back on it. Kolzman, the father hasn't agreed to it. Remember, if the father agrees to the marriage, then she's married, right? But if the father doesn't agree, and he hasn't agreed yet, she can also go back on it because it doesn't mean anything.
There's nothing to go back.
It's like exactly. It's like nothing. It's almost like nothing to go back. Bain he bain aviyah chol nakav. Rav Asi Amar aviyah below he. She can't go back on it. She agreed to it. Whatever it is, it is. She can't. She has no authority to say anything. Rav Asi says aviyah below he. But Rav said no bain aviyah chol nakav. Either can go back. Esvei Rav Huna Rav Asi. Why can't she agree? Why can't she also go back on it if it doesn't mean anything? Rav Rav Asi. The case of a mafata. Remember, it's onus of mafata. Man rapes a girl, he has to pay the father 50 shekels, and he has to marry her. If he seduces the girl, then it depends. If she agrees to marry him, he doesn't have to pay the 50. So let's say the father does not agree to give over his seduced daughter to this man, then he has to pay 50 shekels, and they go their own way. Only if the father disagrees. He asked him, I don't know that she could also refuse to marry him. The double lashon, surely refuse, meaning either the father or the daughter. Either one can disagree. Now, so we're assuming now in the Hafmina that it's speaking about when he enticed her, he seduced her the shame קידושין. They can go back on it, right? So it's Yichon La'akav. Oh, just go. Right. So the first idea was that either way. What did Rav said that either her or her father can go back on it because since the father didn't agree to it yet, she can go back. And now the father can always agree to קידושין later on, but this קידושין that she accepted, if the father hasn't agreed to it yet, she can also go back on it. Whereas Rav Asi said only the father, not her. So the kasha was to Rav Asi. What do you mean in the case of mafata? Wasn't that also Kasat Rashi says that he enticed her to shame קידושין, and she could still go back on it. She could also go back. And Amalu Rav, so Rav said, "Lo Tesla Buster, don't try to explain this in a reverse fashion." In other words, like that's really what you're asking, Michael. Meaning, the case of mafata, of seduction, he didn't have kavanah to marry her there. Give an answer. He can answer you who asked this kasha. When he seduced her, he enticed her to sleep with him. It wasn't l'shem marriage, right? So the Gemara says, wasn't l'shem marriage. Pita shelo l'shem ishas krovi boy. So if it wasn't l'shem ishas, do I need a pasuk to tell me that she could also refuse? You're saying that imoyin is teaching me the father can refuse, or she can refuse. If it wasn't l'shem קידושין, of course she can refuse. What's the problem? I'm not that if she refuses, also he has to pay 50 shekels. You might say that he only has to pay 50 shekels to the father if the father refuses. No, the chiddush is that even if she refuses, you also have to pay the knas. Amr Rav Yosef says, and I'll tell you a proof also, right? I'll tell you a proof also that it must be speaking about where the mafata was not l'shem קידושין. I'm going to give you a proof to this. Rashi says it's a siyati. It's not like a kasha. Usually ihachi. It's like a kasha. No, I'll tell you a further proof that this case of Mafata was not l'shem kedushin, not l'shem kedushin. In other words, Rav Asi can stand his ground and say, that wasn't the case. Don't give me a kasha from the case of Mafata, because maybe that wasn't l'shem kedushin. Or maybe I'll show you another proof that it's not l'shem kedushin. Tanina, Pasuk says there, Maharim Arena Lali, she should quickly marry her. Should shrichei menel kedushin. Then people should ishas kedushin amali. If when he seduced her, he slept with her l'shem kedushin. Why do you need another kedushin over here? All you need is the father's consent. Maybe that's what you need. Maybe you need a kedushin. Maybe he had kavanah for kedushin, but you need kedushin l'dasaviyah. So you could answer it that way. But Rashi says, last Rashi before the mission, hello to Sion, equal Maimer, maybe that's to make sure that it's l'dasaviyah. The first one wasn't l'dasaviyah. Maybe it means that you should give a kedushin l'dasaviyah. So you can't prove from over there that the pitui, that the fata was not l'shem kedushin. Maybe it was l'shem kedushin, but no proof from there. But still, you can argue that. That's the pasuk shot in the pasuk that we learned the pasuk. He raped her, or he seduced her for his own enjoyment, not for kedushin. In any case, it's not a kasha on Rav Asi from there. Rav Asi says still the father can refuse, but she can't go back on whatever she did. She can't just go back on her own. Whereas Rav says the way we paskin because it's not really a marriage. So what do we come out with? That a young girl cannot get married on her own. However, if she does, young girl Katana gets married on her own, and we don't know if the father would have consented or not. So she needs a get, and she needs miyun. That's what he says. According to Rabbi Shmuel, you need a get and you need miyun, right? You need a get. Maybe the father would have agreed. You need miyun. Maybe the father wouldn't have agreed, and people will think that it was a good marriage, and now he marries her sister, etc., etc. Whereas Ula says no. Ain ma'aseh kana klum. What a young girl doesn't count at all. She gets married on his own. It's not a marriage. And according to that, she can't eat truma, nothing. It doesn't count at all. If the father agreed to the engagement, right, and then she got engaged and she got married on her own, then we had this machlokus over here between Rav and Rav Asi, could she eat truma? Because technically, if the father agreed to the kedushin, it's a kedushin d'oraisa, and technically she can eat truma right away. It's only zera drabanan. So we had this machlokus. What you do there? All right, we'll pick it up from the Mishnah tomorrow. Have a good day, everybody. Gemara Tov.